Hi, everyone, and welcome. I want to say thank you all so much for joining whenever you are joining or wherever you are joining from. Today, we are going to be talking about noticing and navigating our emotions, and specifically how that builds our emotional insight that we can take action on in our leadership. So I am super excited to have you all join me today for our second live of the Conscious Leader newsletter. And I had to miss last month, and so I rescheduled it to this month. And I think what we're going to end up doing is we'll do this live this month, and then in January, I will circle back to do the December live, and then somewhere along the lines, I'll make some adjustments to make sure that the flow stays on track. And so first, I want to say I am honored to have you all here. I'm honored to have you all in my circle. And I really appreciate anyone who wants to walk this path with me. The journey is always an interesting way, but I am excited anytime I get to walk the path with other individuals. And so thank you. Now, whether or not you are joining me today for the first time, or whether or not you've been following along since this first newsletter, I want to say again, thank you and welcome to this. It is really a space that I want to create for you. I want it to be practical. I want it to be focused in on the key areas that I think are important for leadership. Things like, finding the time to pause, knowing how to pause, how to integrate some of these more abstract concepts into your work. And so how do you actually develop and embody the presence that is required to lead in complex organizations? And so I hope that this is a space where you feel like you can get some of that information and insight. Now, as many of you know, this live session is part of an ongoing series that we will have that are directly tied to our newsletters. And so the newsletter, if you're not familiar with it, is called The Conscious Leader, and it goes out twice a month, beginning of the month and the middle of the month. And essentially we talk about all different kinds of leadership concepts, how to integrate consciousness into your leadership. And it is based on my book series. And so if you're not familiar with the book series, it is called the Conscious Leader Essentials, Leadership Consciousness Essentials. I went back and forth on the title, but it's Leadership Consciousness Essentials. It's a 6-part book where there's an intro book. There are 4 major concepts in the works: reflexivity, which we've been doing, intentionality, congruence, and then presence. And each one of those books kind of dives into those key topics. And then there's a final book on how do you actually integrate all of these concepts holistically into your leadership. And this newsletter is basically walking us through the major concepts in those books. And so if you've been reading the newsletter, you know that the first book is on reflexivity. And we spent the first few newsletters working through some of those concepts. And now we are going to kind of do a little culminating thing with reflexivity and talking about how some of the other areas relate to this topic before we move into intentionality next month. And I think every month we're going to come together and we're going to talk about some of the key things that come out in the newsletters. I also want to make sure that I'm covering specific practices for you all, tools that are going to be helpful for you to kind of become more conscious and more present in your leadership. And so I hope that you will continue to join me. If you have any questions at any point about any of the concepts, please do not hesitate to connect with me. Please do not hesitate to send me a message and ask me to cover something specifically. If there's something that it resonated with you and you want a little bit more, let me know and we'll make sure to dive into it in a future live session. So today's session is going to build on the newsletters that we published in November. And so November 1st was noticing before reacting. And then November 15th was now that you've noticed, what do you do next? And together we're going to kind of work through these concepts, and we're going to build awareness through what I call a pause practice. And specifically, how do we use mindful pauses so that we can notice and take action. And again, whatever resonates with you, I want you to hang on to that. If it doesn't resonate with you, then that's okay too. And so let's go ahead and start by saying that this is meant to be a practical and embodied space. And so very little actually theory and, abstract concepts, and more practical, how do you do this every single day? And so what I want you all to do is to just settle in and to kind of feel out what might work for you, what might not work for you. And if you want to take notes on the specific things that you want to bring attention to. And if something resonates, again, practice it, try it in your daily lives, see how it works. And if it works, keep it. Now, let's start with talking about why actually noticing matters. And the first thing that I want to say is, what we do before we make a choice matters. And so as leaders, many of us are trained to jump in, to do what needs to be done and just to perform, to push through whatever's happening in our daily lives, and to show up confident and seemingly composed at all costs. And one thing that conscious leadership wants us to do is to slow down just enough to be able to notice what's happening inside of us, in our mind and in our bodies, our emotions and our feelings, and what is happening outside of us in terms of the context that we are in, the interpersonal dynamics that we have, the organizational structures that we're acting within, and those kinds of things. And so what is happening inside of us and around us before we make a decision? And our bodies, of course, carry a lot of wisdom for us. And our nervous system is constantly signaling to us, hey, this is something you need to pay attention to. And so what the purpose of today's session is how do you listen to your body, use that insight that you're gathering to then make more conscious decisions. And what I want us to do is to be able to notice when we have tightening in our chest, or when our face is getting flushed because our nervous system is overreacting, or, if our heart starts racing, or we have tension in our face or in our back, to notice these cues. And instead of trying to push them down or pretend like they're not happening, pausing to say, what is this reaction trying to tell me? Whether it's a thought that comes up or whether it's an actual physical thing that's happening in your body. And to use that to your advantage so that you can make a more conscious and wise decision in your leadership. Now, the key here is that signal, whatever it is, whether it's a thought, whether it's a feeling in your body, whether it's an emotion that comes up, is a signal. And when that signal is activated, whatever it is, whether it's fear, whether it's feeling like you need to control the situation, maybe it's you're afraid because you don't know how to engage, maybe one of your boundaries has been crossed, or you feel slighted by someone, whatever it is, we want you to just notice. So the first thing that we have to do before we can assess whether or not we're going to be in alignment or act in alignment is to notice. And in order to notice, we have to first pause. And so that's why we're going to be talking about pause in this section on reflexivity. So in the book series, we don't get into the pause foundational framework until the fourth book, but it's actually central throughout the entire series. And so the first thing that we do is we help you to understand why pause is necessary and how to do it on a basic practical level. And then we get into more advanced versions of pause in the fourth book. Now, I'm telling you this because the first thing that I want us to do is I want us to do a little mini pause practice to show you what we mean. So how do you pause just enough to create space to bring your awareness into the thoughts that you're having, the feelings that your body is giving you, the emotions that are coming up, the interpersonal dynamics that are happening, so that you can use all of that information to your advantage to make a more conscious decision, because everything that we talk about when we talk about integrating consciousness into our leadership is to make a more conscious choice, right? We want to make choices that align with our values, that align with our company's values, and that aligns with the people and the leader that we want to be. And we can't do that if we don't first pause, notice all of these things, and then make intentional choices that take all of that into consideration and kind of give you that next layer of action. And so what I want us to do is I want you to find a nice, comfortable seat. I want you to just pause and take a long, slow breath in and a slow breath out. I want you to notice your feet. Place them on the ground. If you want to, put a little bit of pressure on them. I want you to notice your breath. And I want you to ask yourself a couple of questions. The first thing is, where in your body are you holding tension right now? And for me, I'm carrying a lot of tension in my jaw and in my neck, a lot of tension in between my shoulder blades. And so for you, where are you holding tension in your body right now? And I want you to ask yourself, what is this tension trying to tell me? Is it trying to tell you to slow down? Is it trying to tell you that you need rest? Is it trying to tell you that you're overthinking or overcomplicating something? What is it trying to tell you? And I want you to do the same thing with any thoughts that you have in your mind. What thoughts do you have in your mind right now about what's happening for you in your life? If you're thinking about your kids, your parents, your dog sitter, a project at work, what are your thoughts that you're having about that? And what specifically are those thoughts trying to tell you about the actions that you need to take? And if you have any kind of complex emotions happening in your body right now, ask yourself the same question. What is that emotion? And what is it trying to tell me right now? Now, the goal here is not for you to try to change anything. I just want you to notice what's happening right now for you and what it might be trying to tell you. Now, because you're here watching a webinar, you might not be having, thoughts of other things. You might not be having actual physical tension in your body, and that's okay. But this same practice can be implemented anywhere at any time. You could be in the middle of a meeting and you can pause and in your mind think, what is my body telling me right now? What are my thoughts telling me about what's happening in this dynamic? What are the emotions that are coming up for me? What are those emotions trying to tell me about this dynamic? And how do you use all of that information to be able to make a more conscious choice about what you choose to do next? Okay. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is using evaluation, which is the second part of the reflexivity cycle. So the reflexivity cycle is awareness first, then evaluation, and then conscious action. And so the second part is evaluation. So how do we kind of evaluate all of these things that we are noticing so that we can make meaning or gather insights from that so we can then take more conscious action? And so this is the you've noticed, what's next? And this is kind of where we move from our awareness. When we have a general awareness of I'm having this thought or I'm feeling this emotion or my body is doing this, we take that awareness of what we have and we move into how do we get insight from these things. So we ask ourselves things like, if we're having an emotional reaction, What are we emotionally reacting to? Is it a fear? Is it a concern? Is it like an ego-based response? Like, what is the emotion that's coming up, and why is that emotion coming up right now in this circumstance? And when you're able to say, what am I actually reacting to, then you're able to put it into a better context. And so if I know that I have an ego-based response anytime someone confronts me in whatever way, that my response is to push back, then I can pause and say, I'm having this emotional response. My normal response in this situation is to push back. But to make a more conscious choice, I can decide, instead of pushing back, I can say, I'm having this ego response that normally causes me to push back. And because I know that it normally causes me to push back and I want to make a more conscious decision, I'm going to say, instead of pushing back, what can I do differently in this circumstance? And so then I can say, thank you for sharing your insight. I appreciate your input. I would like to explore this a little bit more, right? And so what are you actually reacting to? If you have a thought that comes up, if you have an emotion that comes up, or if you have a physical sensation in your body, what are you reacting to? That's the first thing. Now, the second thing is, what is that reaction pointing you towards? Is it trying to tell you that you need to take a different path? Is it trying to tell you that you need to step back and approach the situation at a different time? Is it trying to tell you, hello, you told me that you wanted to work on this, and in order to do that, you have to pause right here, right? And so what is that reaction pointing you towards? And in the case of emotions, you want to ask yourself, what am I afraid of? What am I disappointed by? What is triggering my ego response in this moment? And then what do I actually have to do right now to say, I hear this, I value this, I honor this reaction. And at the same time, I want to make a conscious choice to go a different route, right? So what is it pointing you towards? What are you actually afraid of, or what's being triggered, and how do you use that to create a more conscious path? And one last thing to explore, I didn't talk about it, but your values. What is your response telling you about your values? And like for me, an example with this is I have a traumatic brain injury, so I get irritable quite a lot. And when I get irritable, I tend to not treat people as well as I should, because I'm short-sighted, I'm frustrated, and I just want to move on. And like my value is to be kind, to be equitable, to be authentic. And if I am being irritable to the people that I love in my life, then I'm not honoring my values. And so like when I'm being irritable and I recognize my triggers of being irritable, then I have to say, which one of my values do I need to activate here, or which one is being activated? In the example that I gave you, my value was kindness. And when I was irritable, I was not always kind. And so I had to say, like, if I value kindness, and if when I am irritable, I am not kind, then I have to notice those triggers when they're happening so that I can make an adjustment so I can be more in alignment with my own values. Now, when you're in a leadership position, this matters more than you can even imagine. And so if you tell people that you value inclusion or integrity or honesty or whatever your value is, and they see you not acting in alignment with that value, that is where the incongruence comes in that we talk about in the third book. But your actions not aligning with your values teaches people that you're not congruent in your own values. And so if you don't know what your values are, and you don't know what your triggers are trying to tell you about your values, then you as a leader, you're not going to be able to maintain trust. And so let me step back. I jumped ahead in some of the further concepts, but generally speaking, what are the values that are coming up for you? How do they play a role in the conscious choices that you need to make in the future? Now, this isn't about judgment. It really is about you exploring yourself, your awareness, and your consciousness, and approaching it from a curiosity perspective. And what I mean by this is, like, how do you create the space to understand your inner landscape in a way that is going to help you choose a more conscious way forward? And so everything that we do is about teaching people how to step back from autopilot. So those habitual behaviors that you have, the habitual patterns, the habitual behaviors, the habitual language that you use, to interrupt those patterns. In order to interrupt those patterns, you have to first pause. You have to notice that you're having those patterns. All right. So I think what I want to do now is I want to invite you all to participate in something real that's happening for you all in your lives. And we'll do just a couple of minutes kind of exploration for this, but I want you to think about what is happening for you in your leadership right now that feels kind of sticky or unresolved, or like maybe you might want to try to apply some of the things that we're talking about. I want you to recall something in your recent leadership that we can kind of work through right now. And so go ahead and think about any kind of meeting that didn't go as well as you wanted it to, where either you felt dismissed or some of your employees told you that they felt dismissed, whether it's an email that you got that you didn't respond to as appropriately as you might have wanted to, maybe it was a moment of silence, whatever it is for you. Think of your leadership experience or your leadership challenge. And what I want you to do is I want you to ask yourself, actually, no, before I do that, I want you to pause and I want you to notice. What are the thoughts that are coming up as you're thinking about this leadership experience? What are the thoughts that are coming to you? What are the physical things that are happening in your body? What kinds of emotions are coming up for you? And so I want you to pause and I want you to ask yourself, what is your body and your mind telling you about this specific circumstance? Now I'm going to give you just a moment to think through this one. And the next thing that I want to do is I want to ask you, what is the story that you're creating about that moment? So when you look back on that moment and you say, oh, this person disrespected me because they did this and this and this in the meeting, what is the story that you're telling yourself? In this example that I just gave, it's someone disrespected you, right? And regardless of what the action was, the story that you're telling yourself is that someone disrespected you. And the next thing that I want you to do is I want you to ask yourself, is that story the only story that could exist? And so the first thing that you can do is just reverse the roles. Okay, and if your story was someone disrespected you, flip the roles to now you're in that person's position. And I want you to think about, if you were in that position and you did exactly what they did to you, why would you do it? Why would you have done it? What could have been your reasoning? What could have been your rationale? And I want you to just think of one other alternate possibility, one other story, right? Maybe they weren't trying to be disrespectful at all. Maybe they felt overworked and overwhelmed and they didn't have the emotional capacity to share. Or maybe they know that as a leader, you valued honest feedback and they were just doing what they thought you wanted them to do in terms of sharing honest feedback, and so on. I just want you to think of one alternate story. And the last thing that I want you to do, I want you to think about what you may have needed in that moment that you didn't express. And whatever that is for you, whether it was emotions that came up for you that you didn't express because you didn't know how to express it, or you didn't know how it would be taken if you did express it. I want you to think through whatever you might have needed that you didn't express, and how might you have expressed it if you did. And the purpose of this is just to have you explore a little bit about you were not in alignment with the person that you wanted to be. What could you have done? And if you know what you could have done when you were in that moment, then it helps to give you insight about, in a future scenario, what you might be able to do. And even though every situation is different, every context is different, the more you know and understand about what happened, what didn't happen, what could have happened, that's only going to give you more insight and more wisdom into how to make a more conscious choice the next time. And so whatever you just came up with as far as your story and the leadership moment that you were working through, I want you to remember what is emerging for you, right? What are the themes about the thoughts? What are the themes about the feelings? What are the themes about what's actually happening in your body? What are the areas that are coming up for you that you think, okay, if I have this value and if I want to live that value, then I have to be better about how I manage this circumstance. How are you actually going to make change in the future? So the entire purpose of the reflexivity cycle is to act on our insights. And if we don't actually take actions then or in the future, then none of our insights matter. They're not relevant because we're not learning from them or we're not growing from them. And if we're not learning and growing from them, then the people that we're working with are not learning and growing either. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is I want to first say that I want to recognize that this work is really, really hard, especially in the moment, especially when our ego is triggered, especially when our nervous system is overactive and consciously responding to some of the things that are happening. And so I want to first just say that this is really, really hard work. And wherever you are on your journey, you will eventually get to a point of being able to make more conscious choices in the moment if you practice these skills. Now, the key here is practice, just like with athletes, just like with musicians. The more you practice, the more reflexive the skills become. And so the more you practice, the more you will be able to instinctively react in ways that are going to be conscious and aligned with the leader that you want to be. And now, I want to talk just a little bit about a couple of things that get in the way of us doing this work. And so even if we are already conscious enough to know and understand a lot of the things that we've already been talking about, and even if we've already decided that we do want to make conscious change in our lives, things get in the way. Life is messy, life is complicated, being in a leadership role is complicated, and there's so many things that get in the way, whether it's like time commitment or pressure from the leadership, performance culture, like people constantly expecting you to perform all of the time, being fearful that people will see you as weak or like overthinking if you want to pause or if you want to bring in external feedback. Sometimes things like our own internal narratives about what we're supposed to be as good leaders and those kinds of things all get in the way. And whether it's an ego-based response, whether it's an outside cultural pressure, doesn't matter, because what is the most important thing for us is to recognize when we are not aligned. And when we recognize that we are not aligned, to be able to take action towards that. Because when we are not aligned, and when we ignore our internal landscape, whether it's our thoughts, our feelings, or our actual physiological responses, then we tend to respond on autopilot and we don't make the best decisions. And if we do want to make better decisions, then we have to know and understand some of these things so that we can act in alignment. Because when we don't act in alignment, that's where the incongruence comes in. And when other people feel that we are not being congruent in our actions and our behaviors, then trust becomes a problem, cultural dynamics become a problem, and so on. And so what I want to talk about for this last part is the importance of micro rituals and incorporating pauses and reflection moments into your daily practices. And first thing that I want to say is you do not need to spend 30 minutes a day or 30 minutes a week doing this. The most important thing is you just need a couple of minutes. 2 minutes before or after a meeting. You just need maybe 10 minutes at the end of the week to kind of do a deep dive into some of these areas and to ask yourself basic questions. Where were you aligned this week? What was off? And what actually needs to be adjusted as you're going into next week, right? And even sometimes in the middle of a meeting, right, you just pause and you take 3 deep breaths and you say, okay, I just need to slow my breathing down. I need to regulate some of the feelings that are happening in my body right now. And then I need to respond more consciously. Like it takes literally 10 seconds to do that. And so micro practices and micro rituals are going to be the most beneficial things for you that you can do. So a lot of people, they go to a self-awareness class or they go to some sort of a human intelligence class, and then they say, I'm going to dedicate all of this time. And the reality is we don't have 30 minutes a day to dedicate to something like this. But if you can incorporate micro practices or micro rituals into your daily routines, then you're going to be much better able to react and to respond in the moment as these things are happening. And I think the most important thing that you can take away from this is that this is not a luxury, right? Being able to reflexively think through, build insights, and then act on those insights is leadership, right? Our leadership is a social experience. And if other people are not experiencing our leadership in the ways that we want them to, that's on us, right? We have to make adjustments to our style and our behaviors and our actions to make sure that the people that we are leading are experiencing us in the ways that we want them to experience us. And so the last thing that I want to do today is I want to talk very briefly about a case study that we talk about in the Reflexivity Mastermind and corporate training sessions. And this is, many people are probably familiar with this already, but the Challenger disaster in I forget the year, I think 86. But essentially what happened was NASA engineers, I think over 13 or 14 engineers said, hey, we're worried about launching in the cold weather because we don't think the O-rings are going to be able to do what they need to do in the cold weather. And so over 13 engineers brought up concerns that they thought these rings would fail if they launched in cold weather. And despite all of the engineers' discomfort and disagreement with the launch, they still moved forward with the launch. And what ended up happening here is 7 astronauts died because the O-ring failed. And I think this is a really, really good example to help you to understand why the reflexivity cycle is so important. And so again, the 3 phases of the reflexivity cycle: awareness, evaluation, and adjustments. Now, awareness in this was like engineers came to them, multiple engineers came to the leadership and said, hey, we're worried. That awareness was overridden in the name of urgency, right? And NASA was being pressured to make sure that the launch happened, and the political pressures and all of the other pressures that were happening. In the end, it doesn't matter. But because of urgency and the desire to move forward on schedule, those fears were overlooked. And essentially, the evaluation here was like the culture devalued dissent or feedback from their team, right? And because that feedback was not taken seriously, the disaster happened, right? And for the adjustment phase here, adjustment never happened in this case because they got the information. They said, hey, urgency is more important to us. we're going to move forward. And so they didn't make the right choice. Now, rewind a little bit is if they had said, okay, someone has brought this to our awareness, we have done some additional evaluation, we recognize that there's urgency from the political side, we recognize that there's urgency from the organizational side, but our core value is to make sure that we're taking care of our people and that safety is acknowledged. If they had said that and said, hey, urgency is important, but safety is more important, and they made a conscious choice to delay the launch, they could have saved 7 people's lives. And not to mention the millions of dollars spent on the actual equipment. And so the key here is that this isn't just about rockets, right? It's about choices that we make every single day when we bypass our inner feedback and information and the relational information that we're getting from the people in our lives. In the Challenger example, it was explicit external input from multiple sources saying this isn't safe, right? And I think what we have to do is we have to be able to take that awareness, evaluate all of the different things that are at play so we can make the most conscious choice. Now, what I want you to do here is I want you to think about the previous decision, or the leadership challenge that we had just a moment ago. And I want you to ask yourself, did you move forward despite having a clear signal to pause? Whether it was a thought that you had, whether it was an emotion that came up for you, whether it was a physiological response in your body. Did you move forward when you knew that you should have paused? And if you did, what might have been different if you had taken more time to evaluate those thoughts and those feelings, the external feedback and the context, and any other insights before you took action? What might have been different? And the very last thing that I want you to do is, what is one thing that you can commit to for yourself to do differently in a similar circumstance in the future? All right, and now I want to bring all of this together so we can close out. And I want to say that reflexivity is not a one-time practice. It is a cycle that has to be practiced every single day. Just like when you are shifting your habits and your behaviors, you can't do it once and then think, oh, that was good job, I'm done, right? You have to do it repeatedly. You have to practice every single day. And so right now, you are just starting to build your muscles of reflection and evaluation and bringing that insight into conscious choice. And it takes courage to kind of sit in some of these emotions, to sit in some of these feelings, and to think about, hey, what did I do wrong and what might I have done differently? And I want you to know that if you are courageous or vulnerable enough to sit in some of these things, this is where your leadership matters. This is where leadership is rooted. And in order for you to make it to that next level, wherever you are right now, you have to master these skills. And every single time that you can pause and you can evaluate, then you're going to be able to lead from a place that is more human and more centered and more grounded than where you were. And so overall, that is going to make you a much more trustworthy and disciplined leader that people are going to want to interact with and to work with. So as we get ready to close out, I want you to think really quickly, what kinds of reactions has your body, your mind, or your emotions been trying to tell you recently? What might you need to pause to spend a little bit more time on so that you can see it just a little bit more clearly? And what conscious adjustments is actually possible for you right now based on whatever thoughts and emotions or feelings that you're having after watching this video. And with that, I want to say thank you all so much for being here. The next newsletter is going to be on December 30th, and we are going to explore how to lead the new year with intention. And what we're going to do is we're going to transition into intention just because the timing is perfect with the start of the new year. So we'll transition into intentionality to talk about how to bring intention to your new year. And then the next live video that we do, we will come back to the reflexivity cycle to talk about how do you actually make conscious adjustments based on some of the things that we've already talked about. And so I hope that you all will join me in January, where we continue the journey with closing out the reflexivity cycle. Maybe we'll dive into a little bit more intention and intention setting for the new year. But I do want to make sure we close out the reflexivity cycle before we jump fully into intentionality. So one quick reminder is before I go, if this video supported you in some way, I would love to please ask you to consider sharing it with your community, trying to get as much information out there as possible. And so if you do share it, much love and appreciation for you for doing that. Thank you for being here. So much love and so much gratitude for you all.